everybody, and welcome to Raising Vibrations and to the monthly forecasts. Hope you're doing well. And in today's video, I'm going to be helping you understand a little bit about aspects and phases. And this is my little piece on how I do my little forecasts in a unique way. So aspects and phases is a way that evolutionary astrology uses to measure the cycles that planets have in relationship to themselves, okay, and to other planets, pardon me. So what happens is you've got two planets, say for instance Pluto and Venus, and what evolutionary astrology will do is they will take those two archetypes and measure the relationship that they have between each other, and then from that measurement and from that relationship establish what type of phase and what type of evolutionary condition those planets carry within each other. And it's really fascinating because when you begin to measure your planets in relationship to other planets, you begin to see the development of how you actually experience your life through these aspects and phases. Now, I've got a little slideshow over here quickly that I want to show you in terms of what is the philosophy behind aspects and phases and what type of methodology do we use to actually measure this, okay? So I'm going to show you that right now. Okay, so what you're looking at is two pictures. On the left-hand side over here, you can see this is about life itself, okay? The first thing that we understand is that everything is in a cyclic formation. Everything is moving through time and space. And so because of that, it is not separate that when you look at two planets or three planets in a birth chart, that they are also in this life cycle. There is a life cycle that each planet has. And each planet in relationship to another is reflecting where that life cycle is. It's no different than measuring a new moon, a first quarter moon, a last quarter moon, and a full moon. They're exactly the same thing. We just do it with planets now. And you can see that when you have a new moon, there's a new intention. When you have a full moon, we're coming into a halfway completion cycle. Again, phasal relationship and life, how it's evolving. The picture on the right-hand side reflects to us that everything is in relationship to everything else. Everything. Okay, it's like a revolving door. The moment that you walk through a revolving door, as you're moving outward, somebody from the outside is coming inward, and that door is revolving us around it. And it's like as one energy moves outward like that, another one's moving in. And everything is in a consistent relationship with everything else. And so because of that, it's natural for us to understand that when we look at planets in our birth chart, there's a natural cycle in terms of awareness, and there's a natural phasal relationship that exists between planets. And when we measure that, what we get is this beautiful harmonic dynamic of where we are in our consciousness and how that has been developed. Okay? And the next thing is how do we actually then establish and what methodology do we use in order to understand these aspects and phases? Well, in evolutionary astrology, you work with the planets, okay? So you've got Mercury, Venus, you've got Mars, you've got Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, okay? And then you have the sun. Now, in this diagram, everything revolves around the sun. So when you measure something in evolutionary astrology terms, there's always a focal point, right? There's a focal point, and there's always a planet that's in relationship to that focal point. And the way that you understand what focal point you have to look at, you understand the relationship that these planets have to the sun. So the sun will always be a focal point, okay? That's so when you say, for instance, want to understand the phasal relationship between Neptune and Jupiter, well, then it has a little bit of a different cycle, but still the same. When you measure planets in relationship to each other, you're measuring the fastest moving planet in relationship to the slowest moving planet. The fastest moving planet in relationship to the slowest moving planet. So therefore, if I had to say, for instance, ask you, what is the phasal relationship between Jupiter and Neptune? You would go, Jupiter is the fastest moving planet, Neptune's the slowest moving planet, and so therefore, Neptune would be your focus point, because the slowest moving planet is always the focus point. And that's the key that I want you to take away from this conversation. When you measure aspects and phases in your chart, you're measuring two things. One, if you're measuring it against the sun will always be a focus point. So you're always looking for the focus point. And that will always be the sun if you're comparing it against something. Secondly, if you're comparing two planets with each other, you always measure the slowest moving planet as the focus point. So what happens now is you go, okay, I've identified that Neptune is the slowest moving planet. Jupiter's in relationship to it. And so then how do I understand how this works? Very simple. You get a little chart. And this is courtesy of the Evolutionary Astrology glossary, an ebook. And as you can see here on the chart, you've got this whole entire thing. New phase, crescent phase, first quarter phase, gibbous phase, all these phases. And each phase represents an aspect of development. So what you would do is you would take your slowest moving planet and put it at the 0. You would take your fastest moving planet and mathematically calculate the degrees of separation. Okay, so if Neptune's here and Jupiter, say for instance here, you would see that Jupiter is exactly 90 degrees, 90 clicks away from Neptune. And by understanding that phasal relationship, you would go, okay, it's a crisis in action square. And this is what I love about it so much. When we look at squares in astrology, we're like, oh, it's a square. But in EA, there's two types of squares. There's a crisis in action square and a crisis in consciousness square. And they're remarkably different in the sense. Okay, so you can actually try and read your chart. So, I've got Pluto square Mars as an example. The way that Pluto square Mars is going to work in your chart, if it was crisis in consciousness versus crisis in action, are going to be remarkably different. Now, when you have that power within your own awareness to apply that to your chart, you can actually see what you're specifically looking at in terms of your evolutionary development. And it's really, really fascinating. So the next time you begin to understand your chart in terms of aspects and phases, I highly encourage you to learn about aspects and phases, to go and investigate it. And part of my astrology school, I actually teach this when I educate anybody that's wanting to understand evolutionary astrology. So this is something that when you really want to get into astrology, it's something you don't like miss, because it's so empowering. I'll give you a quick example again, just before we jump into this, okay? Let's say, for instance, I have Jupiter and I'm measuring Mars and Jupiter, okay? We know that Jupiter is the slowest moving planet in relationship to Mars. So Jupiter stands there, and we will say that Mars is exactly 300 degrees, okay, away from Jupiter. In other words, Mars has gone all the way around the astrology chart like that because it's moving in that motion, and it gets all the way to that 300 degrees over there. Now, Mars is what is called in a last quarter phase in relationship to Jupiter. So when you look at Mars and Jupiter in the chart and you understand that phasal relationship, you can actually see that the soul's desires in this lifetime, this is the evolutionary astrology, the soul's desires in this lifetime are actually evolving through individuating, in other words, finding and breaking out of the mold of belief systems that they used in the past and allowing us to see perspectives from different unique points of views. That's the way that Mars and Jupiter, in a very plain way, would be operating in somebody's chart. Now, you come into a world that is very like homogenized and very sort of like, this is how truth is and this is what it's got to be. And you put somebody in that's natural tendency is to not follow those rules. Can you begin to see the way that we as human beings are so complex? That's why we have a lot of people in the world saying, well, I'm an atheist, because most of them have got phasal relationships that are breaking down, that are not listening to the general consensus. How much do we accept other people for having their own evolutionary degree? We don't understand it, so therefore we judge it. And this is the type of dynamics that we can get into when we understand more of who we are as a human race to alleviate the chaos that we've got. Food for thought. Hello, my Pisces friends, and welcome to your sun sign forecast for the month of March 2017. Hope you're well. And of course, in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit about what I see for the month of March. Also, I hope you enjoyed the introduction video, just a little bit of information on how evolutionary astrology uses a method to track the nature of evolution through the chart using the cycles and phases. And I actually teach that as well, by the way. And on the 11th of March, I'm starting a astrology school. So if you're interested in wanting to participate in that, I've got a link in the description below and you can sign up for that. I'm also able to answer any questions you've got regarding that as well. So something to look out for if you're really interested in wanting to learn a bit of astrology in that sense. Okay, so let's have a look what's actually going on for you, Pisces, this month. Pluto is our focus point because, of course, that's where all the dynamics of the evolution are taking place for us on the deepest level. And, of course, your Pluto is situated in your solar 11th house. So what's really changing for you in a very big way, but a long time, will be the dynamics of your friends, your extended family, cousins, etc. Looking at the dynamics of how you relate to them in the past, the way you've connected. Looking at the types of groups that you belong to and friends and, like I said, associates, people that you kind of generally see as people that will support your ideas as a way of facilitating and seeing your own evolution and self-development, should I say. But I feel that March, on a more personal level, is all on Venus retrograde and the way that Venus retrograde is going to be operating this month. I feel that there's a lot of changes within our own deep needs and desires, and we're going to become very clear on the nature of what those needs are throughout this month. And by the time April comes along, we'll be in a space of very different to where we are right now, I feel, especially when it comes to how we are beginning to facilitate our deeper desires. So if you have a look in the aspects and phases relationship between these planets, you've got Venus in a balsamic phase to Uranus, and Venus and Mars are in a balsamic phase. And then you have Uranus and Mars in a new phase relationship with each other. So that already sets the tone that there's something that's completing in this lifetime, and there's something that's beginning in this lifetime as well. So as we look, everything in the beginning of March begins with a Pisces pile up, and by the end, you'll see everything has moved into this Aries constellation here. So you'll start by looking at the 9th of March, where Mars will enter Taurus. And if you have a look over here, Taurus reflects a side of Venus, and so does Libra. Venus co-rules Libra and Taurus. And it's because our internal relationship to ourselves, Taurus, and our needs, and how we interact with other people through their needs. And that dynamic is how we basically understand our essential needs in relationships. And Mars entering Taurus is a big key factor in how we're going to begin to spend a lot of focus on what our essential needs are during this month. And for you, of course, Pisces, this is a big deal because Venus is actually in your solar second house. So abundance and finances and your sense of wealth within your life on your own personal level, that's being radically changed for you throughout the month. And I think it's a big deal to pay attention to the way that you see value and resources in things. If we go have a look at the 12th of March, you can actually see that there is a full moon happening in Virgo. And this is a big deal because I feel that I think on the 25th or 26th of February, we had a solar eclipse happening. This was a new moon. And that solar eclipse really brought to us an intense realization that there is a completion cycle happening for us and we're letting go. But there is also something that we're bringing to the future. And that is that as we complete a cycle, we're also beginning a new one. And what we bring from the old cycle is wisdom and insight. So it's like when you read a book and you gain a lot of insights, you don't strap the book to your body and then walk around with it as a way of remembering the insights. It's just stored in your consciousness. You kind of just allow your book to stay wherever it is. So it's the same thing here. As we begin this new journey into a new direction, we let go of the old experience, the old idealizations, the expectations of what it was, and we take our wisdom with us, and we use that wisdom as a way of laying the foundation for this next evolutionary cycle that we're about to go on. So this full moon in Virgo is going to really play in a key factor in the beginning phase of integration of insight. The next important date that I feel is interesting here is that if you look on the 13th of March, the moon connects with Jupiter and Mercury moves into Aries, right? So it moves out of Pisces, and the moon connects with Jupiter, creates the first series of experiences in which we begin to break away the philosophical ideas of how we relate to people and ourselves relative to these insights that have been taking place with this full moon. Okay, and as Mercury goes into Aries, we've got this whole entire new evolutionary cycle regarding our like curiosity, the sense of inquisitiveness, the sense of, okay, what is out there for us? The mind is going to begin to want to see forward thinking as a way of being. And that's going to begin the new cycle, right? Mercury's now entering Aries. That's the mind moving into new direction. And you can see slowly and surely we're moving away from the past and moving into the new. So the moon will move across and then hit Saturn. On the 20th of March, the moon hits Saturn and the sun joins us in Aries. And that's another significant thing. You saw that the moon hit both of those planets, and both Mercury and the sun transited into Aries. And that begins another cycle, another layer of energy that is going to allow us to find a sense of, okay, what is this new direction? I'm very excited about this new direction. I want to pursue with this. The energy is now flowing in this way. What am I investigating about myself? What am I understanding about the nature of my own inner sense of values and needs? What are my essential needs that I need to bring with me on this journey and let go of what is not essential for me? And then, of course, just 2 days later, we have the day where you just get some popcorn and chill out at home. Pluto and the moon make a connection, and there's these huge T-squares that are taking place over here. And this is the day where we're going to have the energy of death and rebirth. So we've reached a point where our philosophy has been kind of like adjusted. We've reached a point in which the structures of that philosophy have been readjusted, and now Pluto is going to come along and say, whatever it was that's no longer working anymore, I'm going to destroy. And I'm also going to give you the energy to recreate the new structures. So it's a death and rebirth experience on the 22nd. And then, of course, just 3 days later, the moon hits the south node of the south node, and it hits Neptune, all in your sign. And Venus and the sun switch places. Look here. And when they switch places, you can see now everything has moved out of Pisces into Aries. And what we have here is the completion cycle. It's like now we're now just going to emotionally relate with forgiveness, self-acceptance, realization of everything returns to source, and the sun moving into Aries, into a new phase with the moon. Pardon me, not the moon. Venus will begin to initiate these new cycles. Begin to say, okay, this is what's changing for me. This is what I'd like to do new. These are my essential needs. This is the insight I'm bringing forward. This is how I'd like to lay the foundation. These are all the things that you'd be asking yourself. And then, of course, just 2 days later, we have a new moon happening for us in Aries. And as I said in the beginning of the video, everything started out with Pisces. Everything ends in Aries. And that's when we just are now got our pioneering hats on and we're exploring the new direction. And for you guys, it's deeply connected with your self-worth, deeply connected with your ability to feel abundant within yourself. So a very powerful month coming up for us, and a huge change taking place for us as well. So go with the flow, as always, Pisces, and allow yourself to enjoy what this month brings for you as the huge change. Okay. So I hope that you enjoyed this little video, a little bit of guidance towards March. And don't forget, if you want to learn more astrology, on the 11th of March, I'm hosting the astrology school. So you can check that out with it in the description below. Okay. All right, guys, have a fantastic month. Take care. Bye-bye.